Good morning in Germany, good afternoon in China, good afternoon in India. Welcome to Hans Seidel Foundation's second China-India dialogue on the insecure future of multilateralism in Asia. It is to be thanked to Mr. Birle in Beijing and his colleagues in India for initiating the Hans Seidel Foundation's new series, Talking Asia Politics. Thank you very much for inviting today 3 outstanding foreign policy experts to today's dialogue, academic exchange on the insecure future of multilateralism in Asia. Hans Seidel Foundation is one of the most established and experienced foundations and has a strong tradition and a lot of excellent experience in Asia. Hans Seidel Foundation managed to invite 2 former ambassadors, Chinese Professor Zhang Fang and Professor Mukherjee from India. Allow me to briefly introduce all the Asian experts and Germany's leading South Asia specialist, Christian Wagner, from the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. Professor Zhang is the chairman of the Shanghai International Studies Institute and the vice president of the Shanghai Association of Social Sciences and Humanities. Professor Jiang is from famous Tongji universities. He also studied and lectured in Germany, and one of his most favorite topics are German and European foreign policy. Nevertheless, he is a leading expert in foreign policy, multilateralism. He is an expert and specialist, advises and evaluates foreign policy programs for various Chinese ministries, the Ministry of Education. For example, he oversees the International Cooperation and Policy Council. Professor Mukherjee also has a long experience, even longer experience as a diplomat, as an ambassador. He had been India's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations in New York and oversaw, for example, the Agenda 2030 Indian negotiations on sustainable developments. He also recommended outcomes for a UN Security Council reform in September 2015 and had been India's delegate to the WTO organization in Geneva in the 1990s. Ambassador Mukherjee has a long experience and profound experience and knowledge about Central Asia, about the former Soviet Union and Russia. He had long stands in this area of the world and also is very interested and dedicated to introducing future technology issues into multilateral dialogues, like India's first international cyber dialogue here. He lectures at India's Foreign Service Institute and holds a professor and lectureship in various foreign policy institutions. Lastly, Germany's leading South Asia specialist, Christian Wagner. He taught at various universities in Germany and abroad and spends considerable research time in the whole South Asian area and other. Welcome and thank you very much. Please keep in mind that we would like to keep the nature of an academic exchange here. Professor Jiang, kindly may I ask you to join your findings and notes with us. Here you go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Dr. Heber. Es ist so schön, please also allow me also to speak some German. Es ist gedanklich einmal in München wieder zu sein, es ist wirklich ein schönes Gefühl und herzlichen Dank für die Einladung und thank you very much also and to Germany and to India, and it's a great opportunity for me to share with you some points which I have prepared concerning multilateralism. And so I want to go to about 3 points, but to make it very clearly at the very first, so I'm very optimistic concerning multilateralism. Since we human beings, we have no way and to cooperate together, to work together with each other, to deal with our joint future and joint challenges. That's the key point, what I want to see firstly. But to make a discussion somewhat challenging and interesting, so I will go through some critical points. And that's also my intention today to be here. And so I know, and among us, there could be also Mr. Wild, a very, very good friend in my time in Ministry of Education in Beijing, and warm greet from Shanghai now. Also my boss, formerly Mr. Ambassador Shi, is also among us. And so thank you very much for being together with us. So the first point, so my first point is, which multilateralism? Talking about the international order, multilateralism is a term widely used almost in an inflationary way, but on its content, there is still a lack of consensus. In the classical understanding in the 19th century, multilateralism was defined mainly in European diplomacy, means the way to keep the balance of powers among nations. In fact, multilateralism is an alliance building, a tool of power struggle, trying to win a war, not to avoid a war among the nations. So that's the very beginning of the history of this term. But two bloody world wars happened even. That is to see, this kind of multilateralism didn't work. So the common understanding of multilateralism as a system of global governance, about which we are now speaking of, is a new form of interaction for peace, common peace, collective peace, and development among the sovereign countries after World War II, as a historical lesson learned from the disaster of humanity. The most characteristic practice embodying the multilateralism is, of course, the United Nations. United Nations with the principle having international affairs and the world future questions addressed through consultation and determined also by everyone, every country working together. So in the light of UN Charter, this is the common value and also the fundament of multilateralism. But in recent years, multilateralism is more and more complicated topic. Just put it into a picture, as you see it as a picture. With President Donald Trump, multilateralism is in recession. Everybody believes that, out of USA in recession. Then with President Biden, everybody believes it could be in renaissance. And so this way, the world has caught into anxiety, and hope. Sometimes, okay, anxious, somewhat hopeful. Very much depends who is the American president and what this president is about to do. So what I'm very much worried is that the hard-proven multilateralism in the post-war peacetime is falling in division, in limitation. Paradigma like value-based multilateralism or new multilateralism are getting more and more popular. If the UN norms, multilateralism has guaranteed the world peace for decades. Why a new one? I'm asking. If not UN value-based, then what kind of values else do we need? So it's hard not to doubt that adding verbal limitation to the term multilateralism is in nature practicing exclusive or selective multilateralism, politics in the name of value. It sounds very much like global civilization mission of Europeans in the 19th century, described by Professor Osthammer in his book, The Transformation of the World, A Global History of the 19th Century. Die Verwandlung der Welt, eine Geschichte des 19. Jahrhunderts. Ein sehr gutes Buch. Das würde ich sehr, sehr empfehlen. And there he reiterated further, the global civilization mission of the Europeans was an ideological tool of imperial world conquer. So, discussing multilateralism, we do need a sense of history, also the lessons taught by the history. The truth should be that every nation has the right to live or to develop in an autonomous way, which suits his own historic situation. What I want to say is that any interpretation of multilateralism with verbal limitation or ideal limitation, thought limitation is in nature opposition against the true multilateralism, or even worse, a comeback of alliance building, which leads to selective multilateralism, struggle of powers. As history has told us, such multilateralism could be dangerous. In China, one believes, as we believe, and many colleagues from of mine, and even my university, for example, and we believe we have learned out of the history that hegemony fails, so that a country should not seek hegemony, no matter how strong it is developing or developed. And good, China is developing somewhat well, but a rising China should not seek a better, should only seek a better life for the people in China and in the world, and to make contributions for the world's peace and development. And in China, people keep a clear distance from the discussion whether China should lead the world order or not. I just remind us of the G2 suggestion made by the US President Obama. So in Chinese discourse, multilateralism does not need to carry an ideological value, but a common value of mankind, which means multilateralism should first the human multilateralism or im humanistischen Sinne in deutscher Sprache, for the shared future of mankind. Und dieses Schicksal haben wir alle dann zusammen, diesen Planet haben wir nur diesen einen. Und das ist wichtig. Second, multilateralism should be a sustainable. And third, it should be an open and inclusive multilateralism. It is not a matter of leadership. So that's very important, I think. And so how much time do I have? So 1 minute?
1 minute.
1 minute, okay. So I just I'm worrying, and I think, and concerning multilateralism, concerning the world order, and concerning the international relationship, there is really a gap in the understanding between China, USA, and between China, Europe, between Europe and USA, and between India and China. So India and China and Europe, and we should jointly make contributions to make a better understanding of multilateralism. So for this discussion, for example, I will be more than happy if I could invite you, Dr. Heber and Professor Wagner, and also Your Excellency, Ambassador Mokoji from India, so that you come please and to my university, Shanghai International Studies University. That way, we really sit so together and discuss, and what is the European understanding, what is the Indian understanding, what is the Chinese understanding, the American understanding of multilateralism. So make it very clear, the picture should be clear, and then we go together and to think and to make true contribution, so that maybe that's first step of, I would like to see multilateralism of learning. Multilateralism should be in this step, multi-learning community. And so with that, I maybe stop that here first. Okay, thank you very much for your patience and for your time.
Thank you very much, Professor Jiang. We would most certainly love to come to your Favors Institute. Thank you very much for highlighting the importance of history and historical studies. You asked which multilateralism we're talking about, the contents. You defined the classical European diplomacy power struggle approach versus a required new form of interaction, collective peace and development in a post-war time. You also highlighted the dependence about who is the American president. Hopefully in the future that will not be as important anymore as it had been under the 45th president. One of your most important statements had been the value-based definition of multilateralism. If it's not UN-based, then what? Selective multilateralism is dangerous, you pointed out, and definitely there is a gap in understanding. Also, India and China both are very experienced and successful actors in multilateral policy frameworks and initiate jointly important tools of foreign policy, like the 5 principles. So I'm very, very much looking forward and would like to ask Ambassador Mukherjee now to give his speech and presentation.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you, ladies and gentlemen in audience. Looking forward to your question. Thank you very much.
And, thank you, Professor Jiang. That was a very interesting introduction to our topic. I would like to greet Dr. Saskia Heber and my colleagues from the Hans Seidel Foundation. Thank you for inviting me. I would like to talk on this topic on the basis of some events that I have participated in and that I have learned about. As Professor Jiang says, we must learn from the history. Well, the first point is that for us in India, multilateralism is seen as a supportive framework for our socio-economic development. And this is something that we said right from 1946 onwards, when the United Nations was formed. And in order to achieve this objective, in the past 75 years, I think 2 things have happened which have impacted on India and multilateralism. The first is the process of decolonization of the world, which has resulted in a large number of independent former colonial countries becoming part of the United Nations. And today that has brought into the UN Charter and into the functioning of multilateralism a new dimension, which I don't think was looked at in 1945 when the UN Charter was negotiated. The second result that has happened in the last 75 years is putting development and sustainable development on the agenda of the United Nations. And this has enabled the world to look at multilateralism as a means for multipolarity. And I think that that is an important aspect which we must keep in mind when we look at how multilateralism has worked. Two lessons that I have seen come out of this multilateralism that has been practiced in the last decade or 2 decades. The first is a broadening of the scope of multilateralism, especially in areas of socio-economic development, to bring in other stakeholders like businesses, academia, civil society. And we have seen it happen in the case of both the development agenda, which is today the Agenda 2030 on sustainable development, as well as in the Paris Agreement on climate change, where multiple stakeholders have expanded the range of discussion of multilateralism, but at the same time, they have also brought their own resources to help us to implement these ideas. So if governments have often found difficulty in getting resources, today the new approach of multiple stakeholder multilateralism gives governments more resources with which to implement the agreements that they have entered into in the United Nations framework. The second lesson is that for a long time, we had to contend with the impression that ideas of multilateralism were being imposed on the new members of the international community. Professor Jiang referred to it in the concept of hegemon. I think that this is true, but today I think we have been able to overcome this challenge by dovetailing national efforts into reaching multilateral objectives. And I again take the 2 examples of sustainable development and climate change, where all countries are now putting forward their national implementation activities and seeing it as part of the overall multilateral objectives. So this is something that has happened, and this is, I think, something that we need to build upon if we have to keep multilateralism as a relevant structure for realizing our national socio-economic plans of development. As far as India is concerned, we have a stake in making this work because for us, we are not an isolated country anymore. We want to grow and integrate into the global economy. Our objective immediately is to become a $5 trillion economy by 2025. Today, 40% of our GDP is from international trade. So we need multilateralism to keep the international trade going. And most important, we need multilateralism to eradicate poverty, because in 2015, which we take as a base year for all this new activity that is going on, as many as 270 million Indians were living below the World Bank's poverty line, extreme poverty line of $1.29 a day. And I think that this is a challenge now because of COVID. And I would just like to address 2 aspects of COVID. The first is the World Bank has said that the COVID pandemic will add 150 million more people to the extreme poverty population by the end of this year, 2021. And this is going to add to the challenge of countries like India, which have seen multilateralism as a means to bring their population out with international cooperation, because that is what multilateralism essentially means. Without international cooperation, we cannot succeed in eradicating poverty. The second is that we need to have a review of how multilateralism actually works in practice. And I think that the COVID case showed that there was a problem in one of the 3 pillars of multilateralism, the political pillar, in extending wholehearted, immediate support to a multilateral effort to respond to the challenge of the pandemic. And I think that this is something that we need to look at and discuss, because the alternative is the growth of regional or plurilateral initiatives like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership in Asia or the concept of the Indo-Pacific. I do not think either of them fit into the ideal framework of universal multilateralism. Now, how do we achieve this reform? And I think in India, we have been in the last 2 years focusing on two words, reformed multilateralism. I think the concept of reformed multilateralism is essentially meant to bring equality in decision making into multilateral processes. And this is something that, as Professor Jiang said, we need to assert, because otherwise there is the countervailing narrative of hegemony. So to bring equality in decision making, we need to revitalize multilateralism. And I think there's a scope here that we see for the alliance of multilateralism that has been spearheaded by Germany and by European countries, of which India is a part. And we need to push this movement for revitalizing multilateralism through a discussion. I don't think anyone today expects multilateralism to be reinvented. There is no need for destruction to create a third multilateral structure. We need to discuss and approach it through logic and discussion. And I think that we need to look at one provision of the UN Charter, which has been forgotten from 1947 onwards, when the Cold War started. And that is Article 109 of the UN Charter, which provides for a general conference of all the member states of the United Nations to meet and discuss. What the outcome of that discussion will be decided during that meeting. But at least let us meet to discuss. Now, in the invitation, you had talked of the concepts of connectivity, like the Belt and Road Initiative or the Act East policy of India, and so on. And I would just like to put these ideas into the context of our discussion on multilateralism by saying that connectivity today is critical for sustaining multilateralism. So whether it is the Belt and Road Initiative or the Act East policy or the International North-South Corridor, there are so many different ideas of connectivity. But the important objective for those of us who believe in effective multilateralism is to ensure that all these connectivity proposals operate in an inclusive manner and on the basis of the principles of the United Nations Charter, because that is important for all of us who subscribe to multilateralism. And the final point was the role of Europe. Now, I see at least 6 areas where Europe should play a role in the activities of multilateralism, especially in Asia. The first is we must work together to realize our objectives of sustainable development and climate change, which have been codified in the Paris Agreement and which have been formulated in Agenda 2030. The second is Europe must play a role in helping connectivity links in the maritime and land as well as digital domains, because Europe and Asia have got linkages which give a foundation for this kind of activity to take place. The third is in renewable energy. And this is something where Europe has been long looked at as a leader, a thought leader for renewable energy. But you will find in Asia today, whether it is China, India, or many other countries in Asia, there is a movement towards climate action. And the International Solar Alliance, which was created in 2018 and headquartered in India, is a good example of this approach. The fourth is a revitalization and modernization of manufacturing. Both India and China in the year 1600, that is 500 years ago, were the leaders in world GDP. China had 29%, India had 22%. Both of us now have prioritized restoring our role in the global activity and global production of wealth. And China has achieved a lot, and India is aspiring to achieve a lot as well. And it's projected by experts that by 2050, the two largest economies in the world will be China and India. So I think that Europe can play a big role in revitalizing manufacturing to bring in the ideas that will make manufacturing sustainable. And that's very important. We have an initiative with Sweden, which India has taken, called the Leadership Group for Industry Transition. And I think that that will give us one way of looking at this. And then, of course, there is the fifth area of the digital economy. And this is something that I speak of a lot. I think that we need to build on it. There is the element of connections through fiber optic cables. Europe, Asia, Africa is a huge cable which starts in Europe and ends in Hong Kong. The second is the Europe-India gateway cable, which starts in Europe and ends in Mumbai. These are connectivity corridors, which the world does not talk about too much, but I think we need to talk about it because this gives us the third option. We don't have to be stuck in a polarized world of digital confrontation between the two superpowers. We need a third option. The second area for digital cooperation is in human rights in cyberspace. And here I think the extension of the principles of the European GDPR for protecting the data of consumers and for protecting privacy is something that needs to be pushed into the Asian framework. And the third area, which I think is important, but not much is spoken of at all on this, is to harmonize how the digital economy can be classified. In the traditional world, we have in Brussels the harmonized system of nomenclature, HSN, which all the customs authorities use all over the world. But we do not have, for the digital economy, any harmonized system of nomenclature for goods, services, and ideas. And I think this is something that Europe should take a lead on. And finally, my final point is that, of course, Europe has to play a leadership role in restoring the balance of multilateralism so that we endorse the idea, which Professor Jiang has said before me, of cooperation rather than confrontation, because it is only through cooperation that we will be able to realize our common future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mukherjee, for sharing your experience and your findings with us. You highlighted the overall objectives of sustainable development and climate change. I'm sure there's absolutely no question and no debate about that. Also, that cooperation is essential for restoring multilateralism. Decolonization and the importance of the United Nations had been one of the pillars of your short presentation. And you also talked about India's objectives to grow international economy even further, the need to keep the trade going, and of course, fight poverty in India. You pointed out that COVID, unfortunately, we throw back more people into poverty, and you shared with us some insights about how multilateralism does work and how it does not work. Working together is essential, and thank you very much for reminding us that we do live in the 21st century and that the digital economy is crucial to modernization and crucial to improving civilization, but also that regulation, of course, and control about digitalization has to be improved. Thank you very much. I would like to hand over to Christian Wagner now, not only to learn what the German position towards multilateralization in general and Germany's Indo-Pacific strategy is, and how Christian Wagner will respond to decolonization efforts, how the pledge that Europe has to play a leadership role in restoring multilateralism will work, if at all. Please, Christian Wagner, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hieber. I hope I'm audible. Let me first thank Hans Seidel Foundation for the kind invitation to this webinar, which discusses, I think, one of the most important topics of our times. Let me also thank my two colleagues, Professor Jiang and Professor Mukherjee, for the very comprehensive and excellent inputs which have set the stage. Let me start a little bit from deviating from my approach. My definition of multilateralism is, to put it very shortly, multilateralism is all about problem solving. If you have a problem in peace or war, you cooperate with your neighbors, you can build alliance, or you can build multilateral institutions like the UN. If you have a problem with your neighbor on water sharing or any other cross-border challenge, you may look for bilateral, regional approaches. And if you have a problem with development, as Professor Mukherjee, socio-economic development, you may go for trade, be it on the global level or with your neighbors. But I think it's also clear that we cannot solve all the problems on the global level. So what I will do in the following, I will shift a little bit the focus and we'll look a little bit on the development of multilateralism or the state of development of multilateralism in Asia. Second point will be about Germany Indo-Pacific guidelines. I will also discuss some of the points of the recent EU strategy and then highlight some of the challenges. So my first point, we look at multilateralism in Asia. When you take a closer look, Asia offers a very ambivalent picture with regard to multilateralism. On the one hand, the region is regarded to be the economic powerhouse. You know, you've read all the articles about Asia's rise, the shift of the economic center of gravity to Asia. And of course, the region is also faced with a myriad of cross-border challenges, from transnational security challenges, fight against climate change was mentioned, protection of biodiversity, do underline the necessity also for a multilateral cooperation on the regional level. But when you take a closer look, it will show you that we will find it extremely difficult to look for regional organizations in Asia which are working in this way. We have seen only one major institution, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, which has, of course, gained importance beyond Southeast Asia, and which is regarded by many observers as the core, as the center of multilateral system in Asia. But when you think about other regions, when you think about Central Asia, you have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization with the focus on security. But when you look at South Asia or the Indian Ocean, regional organizations are relatively weak. We have seen new initiatives like the Indian Ocean Rim Association or the Bay of Bengal Community, BIMSTEC, which have been pushed by the Indian government. But overall, you can make the point, multilateralism or regionalism, to bring it down from the global level to the Asian level. Regionalism is not in a really good shape in Asia, except for Southeast Asia. You may also think about Northeast Asia, which is regarded to be the economic center of Asia, where you hardly have any attempts for any regional organization to address these issues. So let me switch over to my second part to take a closer look. What is Germany? What is Europe doing? Germany and Europe have always been strong proponents for multilateralism. Germany has started the alliance for multilateralism, and also the success of the European Union is an important pillar in this whole concept of multilateralism. Now, in September last year, the German government has published its Indo-Pacific guidelines, and I think they signal a very important shift in Germany's foreign policy, which has rested on transatlantic relation and European integration in the last year. So these Indo-Pacific guidelines also reflect the changing international constellations and the debates we have seen in Europe and Germany, especially on China. We just had the government consultations with China yesterday, and we have seen some of the, let's say, different views that both countries have, probably on not so much on the economic side, but on certain political issues. So the guidelines, at least I will highlight just a few aspects because I think they are very important. They do also underline that Germany will take the Indo-Pacific or Asia very important, and that this region has gained a strong, a high priority in Germany's foreign policy in the years to come. What is interesting is that geopolitical issues are put at the top of the agenda. When you go through the documents, there is a certain ranking in German national interest in the region, which is also quite rare to find them spelled out, which is about peace and security in the Indo-Pacific, which is about diversifying Germany's relation, and that the region should not be structured neither by unipolar nor by bipolar system, so which means that Germany underlines the necessity for a multilateral Indo-Pacific region. We also have a clear underlining of our geo-economic interest about free and open markets, free and open shipping routes, which I think are also important aspects. What is also relatively new, that there is a stronger commitment by the German government also to put a stronger focus on security. Germany will also increase its security presence in the region. Also, this will be very different given the limitations of capacity that Germany has compared to what other European countries like France and the United Kingdom can do. We have also seen just a few days ago the EU Council conclusions on the Indo-Pacific, and I think they do highlight very much the same norms and interests. So the EU also aims to support regional stability, prosperity, and the sustainable development in the Indo-Pacific region, also with the focus on regional organizations. What is also interesting in the German guidelines, as Germany has always, and the EU have always supported regional organizations, ASEAN is receiving great support by Germany and Europe since many years. Germany has also, and other European countries have also invested in other regional organizations. So we have a strong interest to establish stronger multilateral/regional institutions in Asia. What are the challenges? I think challenges are mainly for the German side, that we have to go for new formats. Germany has this strong emphasis on multilateral regional approach, but I think we will also see, especially when we think about the field of security, new bilateral formats. We have seen just a few days ago a new format of a 2-and-2 dialogue between Germany and Japan, between the foreign ministers and the defense ministers. We have intergovernmental consultations with China. We also have them with India. But these kind of formats can also be expanded to other countries, other like-minded partners in the region. So what are the prospects? Let me come to the end. When you look at multilateralism in Asia, I think when you look at, or when you translate multilateralism into regionalism, regionalism is not in a very good shape in Asia, except of course for Southeast Asia. So this is why it's important, I think, to support the initiatives, the efforts by Asian countries to strengthen their regional and cross-Asian institutions in order to cope with all the challenges that I have highlighted in the beginning and that are highlighted by decision makers all over the place. At the moment, of course, mainly it's the health crisis that we are struggling with. So with this, I would like to end with the point that Germany and Europe will continue to support multilateral efforts in Asia and to contribute to peace and security and prosperity in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wagner, for sharing with us what is new in the September 20 in German Indo-Pacific guidelines and the definition of multilateralism in Asia, which is in your eyes, rather about the problem solving. You noted that regional organizations are relatively or comparably weak in Asia, with the exception of ASEAN in Southeast Asia. Before I would like to hand over to Ambassador Mukherjee and to Dr. Christian Wagner, would you like to comment on Ambassador Mukherjee's notes and Dr. Christian Wagner's findings about multilateralism? For example, Ambassador Mukherjee's highlighted the importance of digitalization and the digital economy, which is very important. And Christian Wagner pointed out, now I've lost my notes here, sorry, the new Indo-Pacific guidelines highlighting peace and also security. Quote from Dr. Wagner: a strong focus on security. You already commented on that. I just remember we used to have an Asia-Pacific strategy a couple of years ago, a Northeast Asia strategy, a Southeast Asia strategy, a South Asia strategy. So Germany and Europe seem to change Asia strategies every couple of years, but that is another point. Professor Jiang, one last comment to Ambassador Mukherjee and Dr. Wagner, and then I would like to hand over to Dr. Mukherjee and Christian Wagner again. Professor Jiang.
Yeah, concerning digital economy or digital regulation, I think this is just an area in which Europe could play a very important role. So I would like to see leadership. Even I don't like this word, leadership. But Europe is really in the leadership of digital regulation. But in digital economy, and Europe needs more cooperation with China, with India, with the USA. So you see, and each country, each side has its own strength, and jointly, and they could make more contributions to a healthy and sustainable development of digitalized economy or digitalized world. As you have said, Dr. Hiba, at the very beginning, digitalization is crucial nowadays for the mankind. And so, and I think that's a key area where Europe, India, China, USA have to cooperate with each other. That's the multilateralism or digital multilateralism you could see. Thank you very much.
Ambassador Mukherjee.
Thank you, Dr. Hiba, and I really thank my co-panelists for their presentations. Just to respond to Professor Jiang's point, and I agree fully with him, we need to have focus on the values of multilateralism. And I think that if you take the pandemic, for example, it's clear that there are countries in the world which are trying to cooperate despite facing the challenges posed by the pandemic. One of the first actions taken by India, for example, in end of February last year, before the pandemic was declared, was to send medical assistance to Wuhan in China. And this showed the kind of common bond of solidarity that we have to display if we have to make multilateralism work. And I think that building upon that, it is my hope that in Europe, there will be some examination of the position on the request in the World Trade Organization for a waiver from the very strict intellectual property rights that are normally given to cope with the pandemic, because manufacturing cannot happen only in one country or in two countries. You have to increase the manufacturing base for the vaccines. And I think that this is something that will be a test for multilateralism in the coming months. And I hope that we will rise to this challenge. Now, in terms of the presentations, I think the Professor Jiang's presentation was in keeping with the kind of experience I've had with my colleagues from China. And a lot of people forget that it was China and India, we were together during the Second World War. We sat together in the San Francisco conference. In fact, China chaired the conference when we spoke of economic cooperation, and India became president of the Economic and Social Council, the first president in 1946, with the help of our friends from China. And we reciprocated in 1950 when the People's Republic of China wanted to enter the United Nations, and we tabled the Security Council resolution, which was unfortunately not adopted in 1950. So I think there's a track record of cooperation and collaboration in multilateral issues between our two countries, because we face similar challenges. Between the two of us, we have almost 3 billion people out of the 8 billion people in the world. And the scale of the challenges, both of us know, can only be effectively tackled by international cooperation. We cannot do it on our own. And therefore, I think I agree with what she has suggested, and I look forward to having this brainstorming in the university in Shanghai, which she has promised to invite us to see how to take this forward. Now, in terms of the presentation by Dr. Wagner, I really appreciate he is a internationally acknowledged specialist on Asia and on South Asia and on other regions, but South Asia especially knows Dr. Wagner very well. So whatever he says is listened to with a lot of respect. And I think I would agree with him that the only shining light in regional integration in Asia is ASEAN. And the other regions of India, even the Gulf Cooperation Council, which was sometimes seen as a possible second organization to come out, it floundered in the last few years because of their internal political differences. So ASEAN and the way ASEAN is dealing with the crisis in Myanmar right now, I think it shows that this is an organization which has matured over time. And both and other countries in Asia are part of the ASEAN experience. I think that's important to recognize. China and India, we have interaction with ASEAN in a framework which is set by ASEAN, their dialogue partnership and their Asian regional forum and so on. So there is a building of regional cooperation driven by ASEAN, to which countries like India and China are attracted. And I'm sure that as time goes on, even in the economic area, the RCEP, which was a major trade initiative for regional cooperation, will find countries like India joining because we cannot stay isolated. So I think that point of Dr. Wagner's was very pertinent and good and well taken. And I think the other point regarding the Indo-Pacific and the regional interaction in the Bay of Bengal or the Indian Ocean Rim area, I have been myself writing on these issues. And I think that these I see as building blocks for effective multilateralism. Because, you know, when there is a gridlock caused by some factors outside Asia in the multilateral system, then it is within the Asian region that regional and sub-regional initiatives get a fresh lease of life. And I think that BIMSTEC and the Indian Ocean Rim Association are two such organizations which have suddenly got a new lease of life because the multilateral system is not delivering. And what is it not delivering is important to understand. It is not delivering on connectivity. It is not delivering on two big areas which multilateralism has promised so much for. One is, we talked about the green economy driven by renewable energy. So this is something that we need to see more of. But more important, and I think for the 21st century, I hope more of us will get involved in this discussion, is on what is called the blue economy. Now, the blue economy was, I can tell you from India, until March 2015, there was no policy document in India on the blue economy. It was only in March 2015 that a policy document for the Indian Ocean was put forward by Prime Minister Modi called Security and Growth for All in the Region, or SAARC. And in that, there is a huge role for the blue economy. And I think when you look at this objective, then you realize that whatever we do will have to be based on international cooperation and will have to be inclusive. And I think that that's the Indian perspective on these regional manifestations that are going on. Even on the Indo-Pacific, we have said it has to be inclusive. We cannot have it as a confrontational structure. And I think on that, Asian countries will come out on and more and talk for the need for inclusive cooperation rather than having ideas which have come from outside Asia and injecting those ideas into our activities. So I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I'd like to close here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mukherjee. Thank you very much for reminding us that connectivity, a term you mentioned a couple of times, is very important, and that only inclusive, not confrontational cooperation is essential. Dr. Christian Wagner, is there too much security policy in the new Indo-Pacific strategy? Will there be a need for de-securitization in Asia, in Germany's and Europe's Asia strategy?
Thanks, ASEAN. Also to the comments by Professor Zhang and Professor Mukherjee. Now, the point is, when you have 10 minutes time, you highlight on what is new and not what is old, because everybody knows what's already there, so you try to focus a little bit more on what is new. So to Professor Zhang, I can assure you that the EU is going to stay a civilian power. The EU only has very limited competences in the field of security. So this is when you read, or when you read the German document is all about, as Germany is an important, as you mentioned, an important trading partner, business partner for Asian countries. These dimensions will remain, they will be expanded. We have seen an expansion in our trade relations with China, with many others. But we also have requests from other Asian countries to go for more cooperation also with our Asian partners. We have a strategic partnership with India. Since many years, we have strategic consultations and partnerships with other Asian countries. And as I mentioned, it's interesting to see that many of the security problems are not dealt by multilateral or regional institutions in Asia. Professor Mukherjee mentioned the ASEAN Regional Forum. Yes, this is one of the formats, yes. But there are many other problems in other parts of Asia which cannot all be dealt with by ASEAN. So this is why I think we should see, of course, the whole concept a little bit in perspective. And of course, also that there is probably a stronger necessity for regional cooperation, because not all challenges can be dealt with by a global multilateral level. Connectivity is a question of regional cooperation, as well as you rightly pointed out, the necessity for green or blue economy. So this is why I think we will see more initiatives. And for instance, we have a very good and very long-standing, both on the European and the German level, cooperation with India on renewable energies. So this is why I think the interesting point in the document is that besides all the economic cooperations which are there and which are going to increase in the years to come, because the Indo-Pacific or Asia is important for the social economic development. The new aspect was of course the security dimension, but I think it's also meant to increase, let's say, multilateral efforts or regional efforts in Asia to cope with the security challenges. And these are not the classic, this is not only about great power rivalry or whatever. Most Asian countries have problems in cross-border crimes, illegal fishing activities, transnational terrorism. So there are many non-traditional security challenges which have to be dealt with by Asian countries. And this can be best dealt with in regional frameworks. And this is where the main focus of the cooperation, I think, will be in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christian Wagner. So there will be a need to approach especially non-traditional security and ecological challenges in Asia. We do have a question from Dr. Klaus Wild, the former German ambassador to Myanmar and the deputy German ambassador in Beijing. Dr. Wild asks, could the United Nations have a role in developing and improving multilateralism in Asia, as both Professor Zhang and Ambassador Mukherjee underlined the importance and principles of the United Nations? Professor Zhang and Ambassador Mukherjee, would you like to respond to Ambassador Wild? First, Professor Zhang.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question of Dr. Wild. An old friend of mine, thank you. I'm very happy and to see you here virtually even. Of course, the UN can very important and substantial role complete in improving multilateralism in Asia, especially nowadays. I think in the United Nations is a wide definition. A lot of institutions, for example, WHO could now of great help in fighting against pandemic, in the in vaccination, and a lot of things. Firstly, and secondly, environmental protection, and in the climate questions, a lot of things. And but as Ambassador Mukherjee even said, also Professor Wagner said, and the social questions are key issues for many Asian countries, and that is to see and to help society, social development in Asian countries is also important area in which EU can play an important role. I think what I mean is some social problems, developing problems are not national limited, but across border. And EU can bring in best practice experiences and so ideal or even material helps. And that's very important, I think. A lot of things.
Thank you very much. We are near the end of today's China dialogue, China-India dialogue. I do recognize only a slight difference in your position, as Dr. Wagner rather highlights the importance of regional cooperation and regional multilateralism to address challenges. Professor Zhang and Ambassador Mukherjee do rather favor a global international UN mechanism and non-confrontational multilateralism. I would like to give the three experts and specialists we have here the chance for a very, very short sort of goodbye statements, and then we will close today's session. Before I forget, please do stay logged on and always look into Hans Seidel Foundations, China Hans Seidel Foundations, India, and please stick to the follow-up sessions in the new Hans Seidel Foundation series, Talking Asia Politics, the Age of Asia, China and India dialogues. There will be more China-India dialogues to come. All right, very brief statements by Professor Zhang, Ambassador Mukherjee and Christian Wagner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. Professor Mukherjee, 1 or 2 sentences for us?
Well, I would like to thank my co-panelists. I would like to respond to the question which Ambassador Will has raised by pointing to one part of multilateralism in Asia, which unfortunately has not been looked at very clearly, which is the United Nations structures in Asia. I think you need to actually review the way these structures work. For example, you have a structure for ASEAN, you have a structure for Central Asia, you have a structure for South Asia, and so on. But there is no coordination. We do not have a UN structure for Asia, for the UN to have a holistic, integrated, organic activity in Asia, as far as the multilateralism is concerned. And I mentioned it because the UN offices are implementing what the countries in the UN have agreed to. So without the structure harmonized in an Asian context, I find this will be a problem. But I would like to thank you, Dr. Hiba, for having really conducted this so professionally and so well. I'd like to thank my co-panelists for their very valuable views. And I look forward to visiting Shanghai for the next session of our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hiba, kann ich noch was sagen?
Yes, one or two sentences, and then I would be handing over to Christian Wagner, who has the last words.
Yeah, so I would like to thank Hans-Seitel Stiftung, a partner institution of my life also, and thank you very much, dear colleagues in München, and thank you very much, Alex, and thank you, Dr. Hiba, and thank you, Professor Wagner, Professor Mukherjee, and thank you also very much, ladies and gentlemen in the audience. And I'm very happy, as I have said, and to exchange ideas also with my old friend, Dr. Wild. And so I'm looking forward from now on, looking forward to seeing you in Shanghai at my university, the Shanghai International Studies University. The name of this university. Please keep it in mind and keep in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Zhang. Christian Wagner.
Thank you very much. Well, what's the final message? I think the new guidelines, both by Germany, European Union, as well as France and Dutch, underline that Europe is going to stay a reliable and a trustworthy partner for Asia. And of course, the new initiatives will contribute to strengthen multilateralism in Asia. So with this, I would also like to thank Hans-Seitel Foundation, Saskia Hiba, and my two co-panelists, Professor Mukherjee and Professor Zhang, for the wonderful presentation and exchange we have had. And I look forward to continue our discussions when we meet the next time, hopefully in person somewhere in Shanghai at the university. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This had been a fascinating dialogue, a fascinating exchange, a very important session here we had together with new insights and new initiatives, new ideas, how to foster, how to improve multilateralism in a China-India dialogue context. There will be much more to discuss, for example, how to include how to build in multilateralism better in US foreign policy, but that will be, of course, a totally new dialogue forum to set up. Thank you very much for the attendance and the participants. And now I would like to hand over to Hans-Seitel Foundation. Bye-bye to everybody. Have a nice day. Thank you very much and see you soon at Hans-Seitel Foundation.